Okay, looks like we're hovering around 16, so I think we're good to go.
Yeah. So, hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Jordan Western, our user journey support engineer, and me, Katerina Gandzichuk, social media content and community manager at SpecFlow, are going to showcase our new plugin, SpecFlow.Actions.Android. Just before we start, let's go through some important points. So if you have any questions, please use our Q&A tool for questions. Upvote questions that are interesting for you. All questions will be answered at the end of the webinar at the dedicated Q&A session. Of course, all attendees will receive recording after the webinar.
So first things first then, so what is this webinar about? So the webinar is around showcasing how we can test a mobile or an Android mobile application using SpecFlow.Actions.Android. So what is SpecFlow.Actions.Android? It's a NuGet package that we created to help you automate an Android application a bit quicker. It handles all of the setup of the app driver just from a simple configuration file, and you just need to basically use one class to kind of get started with that. So with that said, let's get into it. So I'll be using Visual Studio 2022 and our 2022 SpecFlow extension today. So this is the existing Android project. So I'll quickly just show this, drag this out of the way. And I'm just going to launch the application just for a bit of context. I'll wait till it's finish loading. Cool. So this is just a template, I guess, application that I created just so that we had something to actually test against. And you'll see that it's basically a simple calculator. It does add, division, subtract, and divide. And it just takes two numbers here. So let's go ahead and just add these so you can see. So here's the add, subtract, multiply, divide, and we get this this result at the bottom here. And that's basically what it does. So let's close the emulator back down. So there is some prerequisites if you want to have a look at our example project, because we do have one in our repository. If you're interested in going to see that, you can go to SpecFlow examples here on github.com/SpecFlowOSS, and I can paste a link to this. And under .NET 6, you can see this Android mobile app, and you can take that code, have a look at it, play around with it. I will paste this in the chat window so you can see. Make sure I send it to all attendees this time. I've got a horrible habit of just sending it to the panelists. So hopefully you've all got that. So yeah, please feel free to go on there. There's also other examples for other stuff that doesn't relate to today. And also another noteworthy point is if you want to dig into the inner workings of the plugin itself, you can come back to the repository, and somewhere we have SpecFlow.Actions. And if you go to the plugins folder, you can see all of the plugins that we currently have written. And obviously we have the SpecFlow.Actions.Android, which you can then view the details of at your own leisure, how it works, excuse me, and all that good stuff. And also you have access to dive right into the files themselves. So please feel free to take a look at that, and I will actually just paste this into the chat as well. Cool. So the prerequisites. So you need the Java JDK installed on the machine, and you also need to set an environment variable to be able to launch the emulator. And also the same is true for the Android SDK. So anyone that's used or emulated Android before on their machine will be familiar with this. But for any of you that don't, you can view the details under the example. Let me just flick back there so it makes sense. Here. I'm pretty sure I included it in the docs. Yes, here. So you can see the SDK must be installed, and Android recommend that you download Android Studio, which is bundled with the SDK. And as I said, the Java JDK must be installed, and these environment variables must be set. Otherwise, you'll run into issues when trying to launch the emulator essentially. So with that cool stuff out of the way, let's get back into it. So as said, we have our calculator, and now we need to test it. So first thing we'll do is we'll go to the solution and we'll add a new project. And we will use the SpecFlow 2022 extension for Visual Studio 2022, which is like the 2019 version. A little bit different, but you still get the project template here. So we're going to go ahead and use that. And we're going to call this one SpecFlow Calculator, which is obviously the name of the application. And then we'll call it spec so we can see that this is the project that our specifications or tests or whatever you want to call it fall into. So we're going to keep on .NET 6 and we'll use our NUnit test framework. Obviously, there's other choices. You can choose whatever you fancy. And we will also include the fluent assertion stuff so we can do our assertions nicely. Cool. So we've got our test project. Let's just quickly build it to make sure everything's happy. But the first thing we need to do, of course, is add a package reference to the plugin. So once this is finished thinking, the build is successful, which is good for us. We'll right click and we'll manage NuGet packages. And let's search for SpecFlow.Actions. And we'll look for Android, which is here. It's probably worth mentioning, actually, that uses the SpecFlow Actions Appium plugin. So if you imagine, Android can be automated via Appium, the same as Windows App Driver. So both of these plugins consume this plugin because it makes sense to keep the functionality there. That's just for your information. So you don't need to install them both. You just install this one, and you can see the dependencies automatically get resolved. So it's dependent on the Appium plugin and the configuration plugin. So you just need to install the one, and you should be good to go. All the dependencies will be resolved for you. Good. So we're good. Everything's installed. Let's just do a quick build again. Make sure there's nothing wrong with the package. There shouldn't be. Cool. Build succeeded. Cool. So let's create an object to represent our calculator. So let's right click on the project and go to add class. And I'm going to call this calculator form. And this will give us a place that we can add references to our page objects, basically, or our form objects, or our Android elements, whatever you want to call them. And within our constructor, we will inject the class we need from the plugin, which is called Android App Driver. And you can see it if we control and dot on this, you'll see that IntelliSense says using SpecFlow.Actions.Android driver. Yes, that's exactly what we like. And we'll call it Android App Driver. And if we control and dot again, we can automatically create and assign this field Android App Driver. So this is the entry point into the plugin, and this gives us the the functionality to go ahead and automate the Android application. Katerina, do I need to zoom in a little bit, or maybe people could say if I need to zoom in?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay.
I will see.
Let's give it another 25% just in case. Oh, if I could not mistype. There we go. That's the one. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Good. So we've got this calculator form. We've got access to the driver itself in the form of a private field. What we actually want to do now is to create links to these page elements. So actually, I'm just going to relaunch the application just so we can kind of see it side by side, and you guys know what I'm talking about. It shouldn't take just 2 seconds. Cool. So the fields we need to interact with are the first number, the second number, the operation buttons, and obviously we need to get the result from this field here. So I'm just going to quickly copy and paste these in because I already have them. And let me just format this. Cool, and you'll see there's some unresolved things here. So this Android element, we need to add a reference to the Appium package itself. And obviously this field didn't initialize with the underscore. Thank you. And I'll just reformat this because underscore Android app driver. And I'm not sure why this is jibbing up here. Cool. So you can see we've got a first number text box, a second number text box. We have all of our buttons and we have the result text box. And I like to have a class specifically for the elements, just because it's nice to maintain, it's nice to manage, you know, exactly where you're looking for these particular properties. So the next thing we need to do now we have access to the elements themselves is, of course, yes, I do want to stop debugging, is to perform some actions on these things, right? So we need another class, and I'm just going to create it in the project root. So we'll go add new item. And I'll call this, let's call it calculator actions. That makes sense to me. You may disagree, but that's what I'm going to call it. And actually, before we go ahead and generate a constructor, I'm going to inherit from the calculator form, so we get access to all of those wonderful. And then this is telling us we can now generate the constructor, which obviously has the base driver. And again, we need to create and assign a local field so we've got access to the driver. So that's everything we need to get started and doing some interactions here. So I do also have these pre-prepared. So I'm going to just simply copy and paste these in, and then I'll talk through them just to save a bit of time. So we simply have a method, enter first number. Very self-explanatory, same for the second number. And then we've got these click methods here. And all we're doing inside of these methods is we're referring to our page elements. So this first number text box, you see comes from our form class. And then we're simply using the OpenQA Selenium remote web element send keys method to do that interaction there. So I think it's worth mentioning that with using this class inside the plugin, the lifetime of the app driver is handled inside of the plugin. And if you want to see the implementation of how that looks, you can go and have a look at the code inside of, the repository. But just know that actually you don't really need to do much yourself other than this to get started with automating the application, which is super cool and is what we wanted to do. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible for everybody to get up and running. And it's also worth mentioning that this can be extended from the plugin, so you can come up with your own implementation if you wish. And actually you could install the Appium plugin directly to retrieve an instance of this app driver, or come up with your own implementation. So we're not trying to limit everyone. We're just trying to give people an option to get started quicker, but also you can kind of do your own thing if you need something a bit more complicated or complex. So cool. So next thing we need to do then, so we've got our actions class to do some interactions. We've got our form for the page elements or the form. Let's go to our feature file. So this is the default calculator feature. This is the one that comes with the project template. So for the sake of time, again, I'm just going to copy and paste the scenarios in. So we've got a few. So we've got add two numbers, subtract two numbers, multiply, divide, and we also have this divide by zero check to make sure if we're dividing by zero, then basically the app is handling that and we get a zero result. And we also need to implement our missing steps. So luckily, all of the ones that are already bound already are there, thanks to the existing template file. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get access to our actions class. So I'm going to add a constructor for our calculator step definitions. And then I'm going to inject the calculator actions inside so we get access to all of that lovely functionality. And we'll create a local field. And I will get rid of all of this stuff and basically overwrite it with the implementation, because all of this stuff is just dummy boilerplate stuff. And we need to put the underscore here. And why is this complaining? It's because let's make this public, and let's make this public. And let's also put an underscore here. Good, everything's happy. Cool. So let's just do a quick build, make sure we're all good. Why doesn't it? I love this part. Oh, of course. We haven't added the reference to fluent assertion. Sorry. So that's all buttoned up. So we're good to go. Cool. So that, in terms of the code, is basically it. So we've got our elements, we've got our actions, we have our step definition, and we have our feature. And within the step definition, obviously we're using our calculator actions object to do our interactions, and that's kind of it. So there's one other thing we need to do, which is to add a config file so that the plugin knows how you want to build the Android driver. And there's also an extra piece in there, which is to do with the Appium local server. So I'll show you in a bit, but basically what that means is we can automatically launch a local Appium server if required. But if it's handled elsewhere in some sort of CI/CD, or you're executing on a remote machine or something like this, then you can disable that from the plugin. And I'll give you some context on that in just a second. So let's get this running first. So we'll add not an existing item, we'll add a new item, which is going to be a JSON file. So it's not going to be a SpecFlow configuration file, it's just a JSON file. And this needs to be called SpecFlow.Actions. I spell that right, because it is obviously going to be important, and it is. And I'll just copy and paste these in. Cool. So it starts off with this Android object. So we have the capabilities of the driver. So it's very important to note that these details are specific to well, not all of them, but the details are specific to the implementation that you have. So for Android, for example, there's this UI automator 2. I know there's other automators that you can use. Mobile testing isn't my background, so you have to forgive me for that, but you can look up the Appium documentation. It will tell you all about the automators you can use for automating Android. This is the name of the device file, basically the emulator file that gets generated. You can see it correlates with the device I have installed. You can install a bunch of devices through the device manager if you want to test on different devices. We won't go into it though, because I just want to focus on the plugin today. So honestly, creating this plugin was probably my worst nightmare. It was so troublesome, and I'm not sure why it's so difficult to get up and running. But I really had a hard time with no background in this automation to get everything up and running with the Android emulation and testing. So this plugin is super useful if you're not familiar with testing in this way. So this app package, this is the package that gets generated for the application when it gets built. And this app activity is the start activity of the application, basically. And you have to find this I guess this serial number or whatever the case might be. So the app knows basically what to launch or what to wait for before the tests actually execute. So and there's documentation on the Appium site where you can Google it to see how you can find that. So the first thing we need to do, and I don't know why, if anyone knows, let me know, because it was absolute pain in the bum for me. But to successfully execute tests, for some reason, you have to generate this app package in release mode by running the application first. And as I say, if someone can tell me why, I have no idea, because if you run it in debug first and generate the APK, then it doesn't work. The app never launches. So would appreciate some input there. So once this is finished launching, then we should be good to hit the execution. Cool. So it's there. I'm going to close it down. So this generates the APK for the application, which is required to pass into the app driver the file location for that file, for it to start the application, etc., etc. So there's one other thing we need to do, which is just to make sure, and I've remembered this time, I usually forget, is to copy this when we build to the output directory. Why isn't the properties window appearing? Oh, this is fun. Why? Okay, let's see if building helps. Oh, it's hidden. There we go. So we'll set this as content and copy if newer, and we'll save, and we will build again. So it gets copied to the bin folder. If you try and launch the tests without having this, then the plugin will just throw an exception. So make sure that you do copy this. And I think we should be ready to go through the test. So we'll just talk about the timeout quickly. If you're familiar with like Selenium or something like that, then this is just the default timeout, basically how long that the app driver will wait before it throws an exception. If a web element doesn't exist, not a web element, creature of habit. If the Android element doesn't exist, then it'll wait 60 seconds before it throws an exception, basically. But what I've found is, and I'm not sure if there's some other mechanism that you can utilize, but the app on the first test takes some time to launch. So if you have it at 30 seconds, sometimes it's long enough for the app to launch and for the test to begin, but sometimes it isn't. So that's why I've set it at 60. Good. So let's run and hope for success. Let me just switch this back to debug. Run. And we will see what happens. Are you going to run? This would have been an excellent opportunity to run the second poll, Katerina. But it's fine. Cool. No, we've done it. It's fine. So we should see that the emulator will launch. Not quite sure why it's taking so long. It doesn't fill me with confidence, though. Good. Oh, I think I know what's happened. I don't know what's happened. Okay, let's stop this. And let me clean the solution. And I tested this about half an hour before this webinar, and it was fine. So this, yeah, as I was saying earlier, this has been problematic for me, especially with the emulator. So it does odd things. And it took me a while to try and figure out a way of making it work. And I'm not sure why it's taking so long to. Okay, cool. So rebuilt. I'm just going to run this in release again. What specifically? Okay, so everything's fine. If we look at the output, it should tell us it's deploying and the application is running. Good. Okay, close. Close it down. in time. Okay, let's go for it again. Okay, build succeeded, good. And it looks like it might fail again. But why is the question? Why? Okay, so it's not launching the emulator for some reason. So I will stop this and close the project. And we'll open the .NET 6 one because it should. I'm on a different branch. Yes, clearly. Okay. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second, Katerina. Is there any questions to pass the time?
Yes, there's some questions. Do you want?
Yeah, let's go through.
So the first one, is it mandatory to create the SpecFlow project in the same solution where the app tested is?
It's not mandatory, but you need to have access to the emulator in some, I guess, some way, shape, or form. I mean, honestly, I've never done any, like real device testing or anything like that. But no, it shouldn't be mandatory at all. So, but it's probably desirable. So that's my answer. It shouldn't be mandatory.
Okay. How can you explore the Android elements?
I'm not entirely sure. You mean like the actual object? So let's go not into that class, into this class. I'm not sure what you mean. I don't know if you mean the object itself, which is provided by Appium. So you could probably just Google this class if that's what you mean. I'm not sure. Maybe you can provide some more insight into what you mean. But okay, can you link the test results to an Azure test suite? Yes, it's probably unrelated. It's unrelated to this demonstration, but yes, you would just need to configure that in your build release pipeline. And the last question, in the meantime, yes, how would you test apps using frameworks like MV? Oh, okay, is MVVM, is that a desktop framework? I'm not sure what, or is it a web framework? I'm not sure. Maybe you could tell me. I'm not sure what MVVM cross is. So maybe you could explain a bit more. So while people, yeah. So I mean, we have the Windows app driver plugin as well, which can do WPF and other desktop applications. So hopefully that answers your question. But also, like I say, there's the Appium plugin itself, which is open for extension. So anything you can automate with Appium, feel free to come and write a plugin that extends that extension. So yeah, cool. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's build. Why are the tests not showing? This is a horrible project, isn't it? This is going horribly wrong. Okay, so here are the tests. And I'm going to close the emulator. And if not, then we'll manually launch the emulator and see if it plays ball. But the emulator should launch by itself when you execute the tests. Okay, right. Let's pray that this works. Okay. Yes, good. Thank God for that. I'm not sure why it wasn't working before. Something quirky in the project, probably. But you can see the first test is running. it's launching the emulator and the application, but it does take a bit of time to launch, hence the 60-second timeout. But the test should execute quite quickly once this is started. Oh, I'm literally having kittens over here, just praying that this works. Cool, it's working. Good. Good. Okay, cool. So some of you might ask why the app disappears each time. This is normal. This is actually Appium that's doing this, because my first thought was, oh, would it be more performant if the application stayed open? But this is kind of like the default behavior. So this isn't, we haven't written anything special to close the app and relaunch it. This is handled by Appium. So I found that quite interesting. Cool. So we can see that it's executing nicely, which is cool. So I'll start while this is carrying on, because I don't want to, cut it off short, whatever. This is handling currently the Appium server. So this is launching the Appium server on a default port behind the scenes, and is enabling the test to connect to the emulator. But sometimes, you may not need that functionality. The server might be being hosted elsewhere, or you basically don't want the actual application or the test application to launch the server for you. So you do have the option to use Appium Server GUI. So I'm just going to launch the Appium Server GUI. I'm going to close this. So it's just loading on my other screen. So I'm not sure whether anyone's seen this. This was my first experience with this and mobile testing. So you can actually have the server, launched by this tool here. And I guess it does the same thing ultimately in terms of the process in Windows, but it's just to emulate when the server is being hosted outside of your project, and you just need to extend your config with an additional object, which is, I'll just paste it in, which is Appium Server. So it's actually, this wording is actually a little bit ambiguous. So I'll probably change it, but local Appium server required is false, and that means, do we want the application to handle the server? No, we don't. And if we don't, then we need this server address, which is configured in here. So we'll just type localhost in here, and the port number should match. And this is, I guess, the server address for the local server. So we'll start it. We then see this UI come up here, and when we re-execute the tests, let me just build this and execute again, we should see that this does a bunch of logging for us, but it just demonstrates that you don't need your tests to host the server. You can actually do this externally, or it can be handled externally, via some CI/CD or whatever the case might be. It just gives you flexibility essentially and options to configure it. So that is kind of it, and I do apologize for the mishap. I'm not entirely sure what went wrong. Thank God we had the example in the project, which obviously does work. So feel free to go ahead and clone it, look through the docs, set it up yourself, play around with it, or create your own project. Obviously, give us some feedback if you want to see some stuff extended, or likewise, it's all open source. So if you want to extend something, or something doesn't suit your needs but you'd like to use it, then you can go ahead and open a pull request, and you can obviously then be part of the Community Heroes program too. You can submit your contribution, and you'll be entitled to a $25. Is it $25 Amazon voucher, Katharina?
$25.
Yeah. So that kind of concludes the session. Again, I apologize, but Katharina, I guess have we covered everything off in the slides?
Yes, it's probably not our day, Jordan.
No, it's not. It's not. No, not a day at all. Is there anything in the chat? Any questions in the chat at all? No?
Nothing, but let's maybe give few minutes. If you have questions, please ask them. We will answer them. Anything related to SpecFlow or this plugin, and
or you know, if you don't feel, or you don't have any questions now, if you have questions afterwards that you think of later, then feel free to ping us an email. I'll send the email address in the chat window. It's just info.
I see one question in Q&A.
Good. Assume that development time is very limited. Then how would you organize tests Gherkin-based through UI only logic? What's your preference? Do you mean the features themselves? How would I organize tests in the features, or through UI only logic? What is your preference? Yeah, if you could, in general, great. I mean, obviously the features themselves. So, I mean, I'm not going to be the expert here. I would recommend that you go and take the Gaspar Nagy masterclass. So we have a SpecFlow school now, if you guys haven't seen. And, you know, Gaspar really is one of the best people to take advice from when, you know, you're talking about organizing tests, because, you know, BDD isn't just testing. It's, you know, a whole, not a framework, but a mindset, a methodology, whatever you want to call it. So, and the tests or the scenarios or examples, they come off the back of the whole BDD process and life cycle. So Katerina, can you post a link to the school? Cool. Yeah. And I really would watch it's all free, so you can just sign up and attend the course. It used to be a webinar, but it's now made on demand on our site. So that's what I would suggest to you, because that really defines how you know, how you organize your tests, basically. So so hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, I'm probably not best placed to say that when there's much better resources out there. Does the code have any impact on the Android version? No. So it all uses Appium. So, you know, whatever works with Appium will work with this, because ultimately this configuration is being consumed by a class inside of the plugin, which handles the initialization of the app driver, and all of that code is coming straight from Appium. We've just kind of wrapped it in an easier way for you as a consumer to use it without having to do the setup yourself. So yeah, so the code shouldn't, but obviously for example, like your Android SDK version will determine, you know, what devices you can run and which API version, etc., etc. So nothing outside of what you can read in the docs from Appium. So if you're curious, then that's where I would go, is the Appium docs, because like I say, we're just making it nice, packaged nicely for you to consume. So hopefully that helps somewhat. Cool.
That's it.
Okay.
So let's call it a day, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Sorry for inconvenience. Next time we will improve things like this. And again, thanks a lot. Follow us on social media. Oh, yes. Just try the SpecFlow School BDD Masterclass. You'll also get certificate for this webinar, and if you do BDD Masterclass on demand, you will also get a certificate. So thanks again. Follow us in social media, and hope to see you again soon on our webinars.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry.